Today's Bitcoin USD exchange rate is over $50,000, and it's helpful to kind of break this down into more manageable numbers to really figure out kind of how that applies to your stacking goals and if that's a good deal in general. I've been watching Bitcoin videos on YouTube for 10 years now. I started searching Bitcoin on YouTube in 2015, and I've worked for Bitcoin startups since 2019. Over those years, I've talked to thousands of Bitcoiners about how they think about their stacking goals and how they think about Bitcoin and the dollar in general. And so to break this down, today's exchange rate, let's look at 0.01 Bitcoin and how much that would cost. So 0.01 Bitcoin, the exchange rate for that is around $500. Let's just say 500 flat for today. 0.01 Bitcoin or $500, which one is better? Which one is better? There's still a lot of bias, like unit bias, that goes into stacking Bitcoin. The psychology of 0.01 is less than 500. Like when you just look at the numbers, 0.01 is not a cool number to look at. 500 is this awesome number to look at, right? Like $500, that's awesome. Like you think of like five $100 bills and like that's cool to hold in your hand, right? And then when you think 0.01 Bitcoin, like dang, that's nothing. That's just a fraction. Like what even is that? Like that's ridiculous. And that's where I was reading comments just over the past few videos, and someone was asking when I made the video about 0.21 is a big deal. Owning 0.21 Bitcoin is a big deal. And someone said, well, how'd you come up with the 0.21 number? And it was from this thing of 0.21 is a manageable number that most people can wrap around in their heads. Like we know how to have an emergency fund or a savings account, you know, of $9,000, $10,000 type dollars, right? Like we know that number, and the concept of holding $500 in your hand is another number that you can like understand. But these fractions, these 0.01, 0.21 is really hard to understand, really hard to kind of look at it and be like, oh, that's significant. Oh, that's significant. And so the purpose of comparing 0.01 to $500 is asking which is more significant. Which one is more significant? And $500 in the grand scheme of things is nice to hold. It's nice to hold, but in the grand scheme of how many dollars there are in the world and how many dollar linked assets there are in the world and the purchasing power of the $500, truly sit with yourself and ask yourself, is that a big deal? Is that a big deal? And then when you look at 0.01 and you wrap your head around, you watch a lot of Bitcoin videos and you realize there's a hard cap of 21 million. There will only ever be 21 million, which is why the concept of Bitcoin isn't going away, and it won't go away, and why it refuses to die is because this is a brand new way, like a literal technology shift forward on how to do money. Like money is a technology that evolved and came around to smooth out trade among individuals and to smooth out productivity around individuals. Bitcoin is an upgrade for money, like a literal just software upgrade. You think about upgrading your iPhone. You get the better iPhone, it has better features. Bitcoin has better features than dollars. And so yes, 0.01 and dealing with the 8 decimal places and those things is difficult to wrap your head around at the beginning. But when you realize that there's only 21 million and the inflation and deflation is going to work fully different with this new money, you recognize the value and the significance of 0.01. So just sitting here today and the significance of $500 in your life and the significance of owning 0.01 of a fixed supply unit that's gaining adoption and gaining significance in the world every single day, which one is better? Which one is more interesting? One reason why the 500 sounds cool is because that is our base. Like we grew up on dollars as our base currency, and we can remember the first time we held $500. And so there's still some emotional attachment to kind of the dollar as the base currency that you think about things. Here in the US, we're not used to thinking about the world in terms of multiple currencies or in terms of currency competition. So when you flip things over and you're like, wow, only 0.01 is worth 500, you realize then the significance of that 0.01. Bitcoiners, once you've been stacking for a long time, you flip what your base is. Like that's truly, a lot of people kind of get in the weeds about what the definition of a Bitcoiner is. And I'm very like broad, big tent. I do think there is something to the significance of like, there is a flip when you flip which base you're using. Like are dollars your base currency or is Bitcoin your base currency? Both are fine, but it's a question to ask yourself, like, which one is your true base or is your true measuring stick? And that's what leads to different thinking about which one is more valuable, $500 or 0.01 Bitcoin. Because when you flip it over and you're like, wow, 0.01, that seems so small, but then you think about all the things that $500 could bring into your life or used to be able to bring into your life or someday will bring into your life, right? And you're like, oh, that's really interesting that 0.01 could do that. Like, I don't even need a full Bitcoin to make an impact kind of on savings goals or purchasing goals or like whatever. And so that part will obviously be different for every single person, but I'm just really focused on kind of this unit and really understanding your different relationship with the units of Bitcoin and the units of dollars. I like to use like a bucket analogy in my head too. Just imagine both units. Like, you have a bucket of $500 and you have a bucket of 0.01 Bitcoin. And $500 is losing its purchasing power. Like, it's not keeping up with all the goods and services in the world. And we can argue about at what rate or whatever, but just the true rule in general is $500 will buy you less a year from now than it will today. And so the $500 is losing value. Like, your productivity that you worked for that money sitting in that bucket, sitting in that currency, is losing purchasing power to everything that's happening in the world every single day. 0.01 is the new technology and is gaining adoption every day, and more productivity is being poured in that bucket every single day. You can think about it in your own life, but then you think about it in the global world. Like, the global world, every single person that's going to work is looking for a better bucket to put their productivity in. And so Bitcoin is becoming more and more a part of that conversation of what bucket, what currency is the best one to hold my productivity in. I like framing the transition from USD to Bitcoin more as a technology shift than I do as like investing or macroeconomics or inflation, deflation hedges or any of that stuff, because I think it's more natural. Like, I just think it's easier to bring it back to just, we work and then we have a currency choice now to what currency we want to use as our base currency. And I think that's awesome. That's a lot more easier and like actionable for me to wrap my head around and for me to decide kind of how I fit into the global scheme of the world, rather than being super hung up on like following macro investing trends or having to like invest in super specific ways to like keep up with inflation or whatever. Like, whether there's inflation or deflation happening actually doesn't really matter to me. It's more of now just a personal decision of figuring out how am I on the cutting edge of using the currencies that are gaining more adoption and gaining strength in the world.